generally explaining, so what happened this week? What would be an assessment, and how by the end of Sunday you would explain, is situation calming down, or it's still that, escalated?
Good evening. Indeed, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has registered early morning hours a week ago on Sunday an uptick in violence in the wider area of Avidiivka, the Donetsk airport, and Yasiivka. We have seen these violations increasing up to the 31st of January. There, throughout the day, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has registered over 11,000 ceasefire violations on a single day, the highest number ever recorded since the mission has hit the ground in Ukraine. Then, towards the end of the week, until this day, the ceasefire violations had been reduced, and we have seen now calmer nights, less explosions, and in translation that means less use of heavy weapons that are prescribed by Minsk at the contact line. However, the numbers are still far too high. In the past 24 hours in the Donetsk region alone, we have been registering over 1,300 ceasefire violations. They are concentrated at 3 main hotspots, that is to the south, to the north and northeast of Mariupol, in the center around Donetsk airport, Avidiivka and Yasiivka, and to the east there between Svetlodarsk and Debaltsevo. There in these geographic areas, most and the majority of all violations that the mission has been recording had been occurred.
Alexandr, we spoke 2 days ago in Avidiivka, and I asked you about the intensity of the conflict and whether you expected it to increase. And at that time, we could hear shelling in the background, and it seemed like it was spiraling out of control. And now, 2 days later, it seems like it's totally calmed down. To people who don't follow the conflict closely, how do you explain that type of ability to turn it on and off like that?
You're absolutely right. The situation remains highly unpredictable, and it's unpredictable because the root causes of this uptick in violence are still present at the contact line in these 3 hotspots, and that namely is the presence of heavy weapons on both sides of the contact line. We have seen in our reports, we have seen them within the city of Avidiivka, we have seen them within the city of Donetsk and elsewhere along the contact line. Just today, our patrols, for instance, in Kruta-Balka, across of Avidiivka, have seen T-64 tanks in an area where they shouldn't be. We have seen a massive amount of these weapons in an area they have had to be removed a long time ago. Furthermore, the close proximity of the Ukraine armed forces and armed formation positions are far too close. This leads to constant tensions in these areas, and these tensions translate often in long-lasting battles. The numbers that we've been registering today are still far too high. It remains and will remain unpredictable unless these weapons are withdrawn and there is some more distance between the positions that are now far too close.
And Alexandr, you mentioned that previously. You mentioned that the violations have become blatant. That whereas they used to try to hide the violations and the equipment, now it just seems like everybody's keeping everything out in the open, and they really don't care if OSCE observers see them. And we saw that in Avidiivka this week. When did this start happening? Is this new?
Well, first of all, it's very important to mention that the task of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission is to monitor and observe, and it's those who have committed to bring about change and to take measures to react on these reports. And therefore, we expect, of course, that when the mission indicates violations of Minsk, that measures have been taken to remove those violations, to bring about more stability and normality to the line. But you're right. We have seen, especially in the past week, more weapons in the open, more weapons during daytime in the open. It is naturally then when you count 11,000 plus violations as in a single day, that there must be an equal amount of weaponry on both sides of the contact line, and an equal amount of man handling this weaponry, and an equal amount of supply systems that supply these guns at the contact line. And therefore, it is no wonder that the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission sees more hardware when the ceasefire violations turn up.
We're extremely curious that you're in Donetsk. Of course, it's very difficult for some of the foreign correspondents and the Ukrainians to be there. So what you can say about situation currently? Do you hear shooting? You know, how much damage is caused to the civilian population? As of course, there would be in such kind of conflicts talks that, you know, the sides are not targeting civilians.
During the brief discussion we have had now, I have heard from the room here 3 explosions within the city perimeter. We have seen, of course, for a long time that the western and northeastern outskirts of the city have been severely affected by the ongoing fighting now in its 3rd winter. And also midweek when Avidiivka was hit in the center, more or less at the same time, Donetsk city was hit in the center. And sadly, the civilians in both cases have been suffering. There were 2 killed civilians in Avidiivka and 2 killed civilians here in Donetsk city. Both parts of the equation here suffer equally. But I can also give you some good news today. The OSCE Special Monitoring Mission has tried now, together with the Joint Center for Control and Coordination and the sites, to re-establish and reconnect electricity that would then provide the residents of Avidiivka and the water filtration station in Donetsk electricity. And now today, in mid-afternoon, that had been managed and it is now done. And we have heard that the lights went back on in Avidiivka. And I think this is where everyone should be focusing on. The humanitarian agenda should come first. Any political agenda should have the 2nd seat. It's equally important, however. The civilians in this conflict have been suffering for far too much on both sides of the line, and that is where the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission would like that more attention is being paid, and we shall make sure that the suffering of the population is being highlighted, and where we can, as we have done today, in cooperation with other stakeholders, we will try to make sure that some of the damage that had been the result of this ongoing fighting can be remedied, at least on a temporary basis. But once again, restoring electricity for Avidiivka is a temporary measure, and it might be quickly undone if the sides do not undertake measures that will calm down the situation more sustainably. At the moment, we have an unstable situation. This needs to be changed and can be changed if some of the major provisions of Minsk are being implemented with no compromise.